school does not want to admit me because I'm Asian American, then there's not much I can do about that because it's a part of me that I just can't get rid of.
For years, many Asian Americans were told that affirmative action was the reason they weren't getting into elite colleges, that somehow Black and Latino students were standing in the way of their success.
The only problem with ICE is that they're going after every minority group except Black people. I mean, you're trying to reduce crime. You can just give them more room to breathe.
And this is exactly why Black people stepped away from this fight, because at the end of the day, you can say that these are dark humor jokes all you want, but the truth is, every joke has a bit of the truth in it. And the fact that he said they're not going after Black people shows us not exactly that they're not going after Black people, but he wants them to harm Black people. He wants them to solely focus on Black people. The problem with this administration is that even though Black people blatantly said that they will go after all of you guys if you guys vote for this, right? People didn't believe it because Black people have been the sole target for so many years, and they were absolutely ecstatic for Black people to get something negative from this administration, not realizing that their oppression is tied into ours. So the truth is that even when people don't support ICE, right, their support solely comes from their group of people being hurt, not the fact that it's hurting everybody else. They would be perfectly fine if Black people were the sole targets. So many people would be perfectly fine if Black Americans were the sole target of ICE assaults and violence.
And when the Supreme Court struck down affirmative action, a lot of people celebrated, believing this would finally open more doors for them.
A lot of Asian Americans thought that they were exempt from the ICE raids, and they are quickly finding out that that is not the case. Okay, so if you have not heard, a Hyundai plant in Georgia was raided, and a number of South Korean nationals were detained. Now, Hyundai is actually a South Korean car. You know, they are a South Korean car manufacturer, and they were opening new plants in Georgia, and they had sent a number of South Koreans here to help get everything, flowing. And they did have, some of them obviously had visas. Now they're saying they are taking their people back, and there is going to be a pause on this Hyundai plant. Now, mind you, it's not just South Koreans that work there. It's Americans too. And now that plant might not run anymore. They might say, forget the United States, since y'all are detaining our people. Mind you, a white woman who is running for a state representative in a neighboring county actually bragged about making phone calls to ICE about potential illegal workers at the Hyundai plant, and other people who worked at the Hyundai plant called on these people. Mind you, you're working for a South Korean company and you're calling ICE on South Koreans. Nonetheless, I saw somebody say that they looked up the stats, and over 60% of Asians in Georgia voted for Trump. So they voted for this administration who is doing mass deportations, thinking that it was not going to affect their community. And I seen an Asian girl making a video about it, and she literally said Korean or Asians are normally not the target, when it comes to deportation. Y'all remember what happened when they fought and sued to get rid of affirmative action, and then their acceptance rates decreased tremendously, while acceptance rates of African Americans or Black people who they thought were getting in by affirmative action remained the same. They think they are the exception, and every time they find out.
But then reality hit. Acceptance numbers started coming in, and for many Asian American applicants, the results weren't what they expected.
Oh, look at that. Asian Americans signing on to be used as tools of white supremacy to dismantle affirmative action did nothing to address the discrimination faced by Asian Americans in college admissions. Because dismantling affirmative action didn't address the fact that selective colleges admit Asian American applicants at a rate 28% less than similarly qualified white applicants. It's almost like the discrimination faced by Asian Americans in college admissions never had anything to do with Black students or affirmative action, and had everything to do with legacy admissions and the choices that colleges make to discriminate against Asian Americans in order to give preferential treatment to lesser qualified white students. If only black people had tried to warn us. Oh wait, they did.
The Asian community is literally so anti-black, and it literally fucking pisses me off. Like, we are literally so uneducated, uninformed, just misinformed, everything about the black community, and it pisses me off. And like, it just boggles my mind how a lot of Asians see black people as beneath them. I shit you not, I literally saw someone on my story and I literally was so gagged. Like, I was like, are you serious right now? And I sent him a message, ask him if he's being serious about this. This guy is Bhutanese. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it, but like, I guess he got like some kind of spray tan or whatever because he's doing some kind of stupid movie shoot or whatever. Roy posts on his story and says, because his skin is like 10 shades darker or something, he said, "Can I say the N-word now?" with a ninja emoji next to it. I slid up so fucking quick and I asked this man, are you serious right now? And guess what? That man left me on red. Need I say again that he is not black? He is Bhutanese from Bhutan or whatever the f you pronounce it. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. Quite honestly, like, the Asian community is literally so underhandedly racist to the black community, and it just, like, not to mention the black community is one of the most supportive of marginalized groups that has ever like uplifted the Asian community and actually put effort into supporting us. I'm probably gonna piss a lot of Asians off for saying that, but it's literally the truth and I see it for what it is.
In some schools, Asian enrollment actually dropped, while white enrollment increased, and suddenly people started asking the obvious question, if black students weren't the reason, then who was?
So first of all, it is some Asian Americans. It is a minority, so please do not fall for this divide and conquer tactic, because that is exactly what Edward Blum and the Supreme Court want you to do. Edward Blum wanted Asian Americans to blame black people for their not getting into college, and Edward Blum and the Supreme Court want black people to blame Asian Americans for affirmative action being banned. But 70% of Asian Americans support affirmative action, and if you break it down by ethnicity, among Japanese Americans, I think that the approval is as high as 86%. I think that Chinese Americans have the lowest approval rating, and even then it is 56%. There is no Asian ethnicity where a majority disapprove of affirmative action. And in the most recent case, there were more Asian Americans involved in the lawsuit in supporting Harvard and in filing amicus briefs in support of affirmative action than there were Asian American plaintiffs who sued Harvard. Now, to answer your question, the reason why some Asian Americans think that this decision is a win for them is because they fell for divide and conquer tactics and they aligned with whiteness and they blamed black people for their not getting into college. Something I'll touch upon, as long as we do understand that a lot of Asian Americans like myself are aware of this and it doesn't change our support of affirmative action, research has indicated that if college admissions was based purely on GPA and standardized test score, then enrollment among Asian Americans would increase slightly, but we're talking about tenths of a percent. And it's also indicated that the 12% or so of Asian Americans currently enrolled in college who did benefit from affirmative action under such a system would likely lose their seats, and they tend to be Asian Americans who come from lower income families. On a purely personal note, when I was applying to the University of Michigan in the 1990s, it was generally thought that being Asian American is a disadvantage in college admissions. And what my dad told me is that since I am a first generation born Asian American, I have a lot of privilege. I was born and raised in a country that was stolen from Native Americans, that was built off the free labor of enslaved black people. Furthermore, I'm not the descendant of a railroad Chinese. I am not the descendant of a Japanese American who was interned during World War II. And at that time, we thought that I was not the descendant of anybody who was negatively impacted by the Chinese Exclusion Act. It turns out that wasn't true. But what my dad said was, if the University of Michigan is going to remove a quarter point from your application because you're Asian American, and that is necessary in order to redress historical harm done to black people and Native Americans, then so be it. And what the stereotypical Asian hard work ethic meant in my household is you just need to work that much harder to make up for that quarter point. And what you don't do is you do not blame the people who have historically been harmed. What you do is you work hard to change the system. So I am disappointed in my fellow Asian Americans who don't seem to understand that.
That's when a lot of people began realizing something Black Americans had been saying for decades. Black communities weren't the obstacle. They were often the ones fighting to make the system fair in the first place.
Yeah, but there were a lot of Asian Americans that were against affirmative action. They claim that affirmative action favors African Americans and Latinos. And a lot of Asian Americans, like this guy Kenny, are celebrating today, as you can see from his tweet above here. As you can see, Kenny has a new book where he's going to talk about woke as if he knows what woke is. If you guys remember, a month or so ago, I did a video about Dr. Zama here and Kenny, who worked together to end the DEI program at a top medical school in North Carolina. Now, Dr. Zama benefited from DEI. He migrated here from Cameroon. And of course, when they get to the top, they basically destroy the ladder for others coming up that ladder. You know, this is what happens when these men get some education and don't have history knowledge of the history of racism in this country, and then they become Republican. This is the result.
And the lawsuit that ended affirmative action, it wasn't started by Asian Americans. It was led by activist Edward Blum, who has spent years challenging civil rights policies.
So I saw this and it made me really upset, albeit it is Fox News, so take it with a grain of salt. He says he would have gotten into one of his dream schools if it wasn't for these meddling Negroes. It applied to MIT, Caltech, Princeton, Harvard, Carnegie Mellon, and UC Berkeley, and he was rejected by all of them. I was scared of getting backlash on social media for raising awareness about unfair admission, for fighting for what I think is a really important issue. So he goes to the Students for Fair Admissions, sketchy. He said, I gave them my test scores and then they must have ran the model on that. I'm not sure where they ran that on. And they told me I had a 20% chance of getting accepted to Harvard as an Asian American and a 95% chance as an African American. Mind you, these are the rates of admission at Harvard. And he's right here, 27.9% Asian, 15.2% African American. Oh, I forgot, California banned affirmative action in the 90s. But I don't think he realizes that he's also a minority, that he also benefits from affirmative action. But mind you, all of these Ivy League schools make up like less than 5% of African American people, but somehow it's their fault he couldn't get into these schools. It's crazy how he blames the black kids, but not the legacy kids, or the kids that have rich parents that give money to the schools. And not to mention, Berkeley has primarily Asian students. Not to mention, a few years ago, there was a big scandal involving parents bribing school officials to get their below average kids into the schools. But yes, let's blame it on affirmative action. And let's not mention that near perfect scores don't cut it anymore. You can have perfect scores and still not get in. It doesn't equal to automatic acceptance into these big Ivy League schools, because everybody who's getting into these schools either have the same grades as you or better grades than you. If you're lacking in extracurricular activities, creativity, and other aspects, then you're not gonna get in. Obviously, there's anti-Asian racism in admissions, but to blame black people for the reason why you're not getting into these schools is incredibly ridiculous. He's from Florida, and UC schools prioritize California students. Whenever somebody gets rejected from one of their dream schools, they get on social media, they go to Fox News, they go to some racist news place, and they blame black people for it every single time, because y'all don't really believe that black people belong in these schools. Because when you get in, you start to moan and bitch about affirmative action and how people below standards are getting in. When these kids applying to these schools have perfect SAT scores and perfect GPAs, just like you. Now it takes more than a perfect score to get into these schools, to get even viewed or even interviewed. You gotta be a diamond in the rough these days to get into any of these schools. Either you're a legacy, you are wealthy, you are an athlete, or you have like an amazing story for you to get in. Maybe your essay wasn't good because you have a perfect score in the math, but not in the writing section. So maybe that could have been it. You got denied by a bunch of white institutions, but somehow you blame black people for that, as if we're in charge of them.
Many now argue that Asian Americans were used as the face of a legal battle that was never truly about helping them, but about dismantling protections designed to create opportunity.
Well. You did all that yapping for what? There was a reason why affirmative action was put into place, but you said that affirmative action discriminates against Asian Americans in the very first class at Yale University after the Supreme Court said that affirmative action was unconstitutional. We saw a decrease in the Asian American population. But you know which group saw an increase? You got it. The white population increased to 46%, and the Asian population decreased from 30% to 24%, while the black population stayed the same. Same with Hispanics, although there was a slight increase. Let this be yet another lesson. Don't go against your own interest. You were willing to be the face and the lapdog for white conservatives who were against affirmative action, and in the end, in this case, it backfired on your racial group, not against black people and Hispanics who you thought were benefiting unfairly and disproportionately. You threw a sledgehammer and the sledgehammer came right back and hit you in the face.
Now the bigger conversation is shifting. People are no longer just asking who got admitted. They're asking who the system was really built for.
To other members of the so-called model minority, I need you to listen up. Yesterday, the Supreme Court banned affirmative action in admissions in higher education, and it was a case brought to them by a bunch of mostly rich Chinese Americans that allowed them to do that. Congratulations, they got what they wanted. They thought that unqualified black and brown students were taking the places of Asian Americans, specifically rich ones, but instead they get to watch more rich white people and legacy admissions get in at the highest rates that we've seen for like 50 years. So now higher education is gonna look like basically every other industry that's had problems with diversity. I'm gonna use publishing as an example because I'm an author. Just a couple years ago in 2018, I learned that there were more published books featuring animals in children's literature than people of color. And of course, all the rest of the published books featured white characters by white authors. If we want to talk about movies, before Crazy Rich Asians came out, the only blockbuster hit with an all-Asian cast was The Joy Luck Club. And that came out in like the 80s. So I won't be surprised if this Supreme Court decision causes other industries, so like media, tech, banking, publishing, whatever, they're gonna say, oh, colleges don't have to consider racial diversity anymore. So we're not even gonna try to have that one BIPOC employee. We're gonna just admit people based on merit. And you know what that means? Only hiring people that they're comfortable with, i.e. white people. So just to reiterate, as a Chinese American person who attended both Harvard and Columbia, I fully support affirmative action. And if you are a member of my demographic and you didn't get into the college that you wanted, you might want to blame those rich white kids who have their parents' names on buildings and not black and brown kids who 100% deserve to be there.
Legacy admissions, donor influence, family connections, those conversations are getting louder than ever.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm still pissed about those Asian Americans who helped that white man get rid of affirmative action. And it didn't even benefit us in the end. Unsurprisingly. So I need Asian Americans to remember that none of this was ever built for us. The lawsuit that ended affirmative action was not started by Asian Americans. It was led by Edward Bloom, a white conservative activist who has spent years just trying to dismantle civil rights protections because that's the type of person he is. He created Students for Fair Admissions and specifically recruited Asian American plaintiffs to frame this narrative as Harvard discriminates against Asians, but this was never about helping us. It was about using us, as always. About using us to attack policies designed to create equity and level the playing field. Now, you have probably seen a lot of people saying that affirmative action lowers the bar. Oh, DEI also lowers the bar. They're not the same thing, but people think they are. That is so misleading, and it's rooted in anti-blackness. Also, are we noticing the percentage of white people admitted and the overwhelmingly white legacy admissions at these institutions is something that specifically never gets touched in this conversation? Why is that? Is it clicking? So here's some facts from the case. So Asian students did have the highest GPAs and test scores, but got rated lower on personal qualities by the admissions officers. And for identical profiles, Asian applicants had a 25% chance of getting in, while black applicants had a 95% chance. And that stat gets weaponized to imply that black students are less qualified, but affirmative action isn't lowering the standard. It's about addressing systemic inequities caused by racist policies like housing discrimination, segregated schools, and the wealth gap, etc. This is classic model minority propaganda portraying Asian Americans as proof that racism is over to justify attacking other communities. That is exactly why they ended the immigration ban against Asians in the US and then only allowed in high-achieving Asians from Asia, scientists, doctors, etc., to come to the US so that they could use us to prove that they weren't racist to Black people during the Cold War. I need you to pay attention to historical context about how this has all gone down. History is rhyming. It's the same thing. Here's the thing. I want to say that 69% of Asian Americans actually support affirmative action, and advocacy groups like Chinese for Affirmative Action and CRAC fought to keep it. The loudest anti-affirmative action voices do not represent all of the Asian community. They do represent a narrative designed to divide us, though. And for Asian Americans, especially young Asian Americans, I need you to hear me. Even though many in our community do not align with the model minority nonsense, I can attest to that being true, the ones who do are often the ones that get the most visibility, because playing that role perpetuates white supremacy. And at the end of the day, we have to be real about all of this. None of this was ever for us anyways. This country literally had laws banning us from being here. We have always been seen as outsiders. We have only ever been used as a tool, a wedge to uphold white supremacy, and then they will scapegoat us the second they need to. That has always happened in times of sickness, war, and a loss of jobs. And it is on us to disrupt that role, to stop aligning with anti-Blackness, and to refuse to be used as puppets for systems that were never built for us anyway. It is imperative that we, as Asian Americans, learn our history, learn how we've been used, understand it, and choose solidarity. Because if we're not fighting these systems together, we are always on the chopping block. Remember how they treated us during COVID.
Some of y'all just learned the hard way. You were not the competition. A lot of people really thought getting rid of affirmative action was going to give them more opportunities. If you move more Black people out of the way, suddenly you the next person in line. No, that's not how this works. What you fail to understand is this. Black Americans weren't just in the race. We were the ones fighting to make sure that the race was fair in the first place. That wasn't competition. That was infrastructure. It's like seeing somebody hold a ladder steady and you kick it thinking you about to climb faster. Now the ladder gone and everybody on the ground. And here's the part that really stings. You thought removing Black people would make all this easier. All it did was show you they weren't holding you back. They just weren't planning to let you in either. So I want to ask y'all, do you think this was a miscalculation by people who wanted to get rid of this? And now they're waking up to realizing who was actually on their side? Because I know I don't think folks are waking up at all. And if anything, they're still confused about how come I didn't get in?
And for many Asian Americans, this moment has become a wake-up call. Because after helping tear down the ladder, some are realizing the ladder was never blocking them. It was holding the whole system up.